Well, I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Nancy Martin. I just retired from a 35-year career where I was an executive at GE, and now I own my own consulting company. So I've had the pleasure to talk to all three of the individuals in front of you. But by way of introduction, we're on the adapt piece. So what I wanted to tell you that adapt to me does not mean conform. It does mean, however, adjusting to the circumstances that are either thrust upon you or that you create on your own. So we're going to talk to all three entrepreneurs on this stage, and I'm going to really focus on certain pivot points where they really had to adapt. Really dive into what was their emotional state and what makes somebody do what these three people have done. But also, to introduce these people, I'm not going to read their bios. I'm going to give them a word list. Each one of you has 11 words that I'm going to read that, based on our conversations, play some part in your life. And then you have to come up with the 12th word, introduce yourself, and talk about your current job. Sound good? And we're going to keep this pretty lively. I am going to leave a lot of time for questions at the end. And I'm not going to tell you who I'm reading, but hopefully you'll guess from the word list. Yeah. I hope. Okay. Homeschooled, dancer, Forbes 30 under 30, $250,000 raised for startup, NASA, weightlifter, quits NASA, author, runner, Ohio, entrepreneur.
Okay, good. You left out an important one, that is electrical engineer. That's me.
Excellent.
I love that she started with homeschool because that was easy for me. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that's homeschooled up here. Well, hi everybody. Just a quick note on what I do today. That's my background in 12 words. But my name is Courtney Gross, and currently I am a consultant for innovation hubs, startup incubators, and accelerators. And I'm moving into a full-time position as director of development for an energy incubator in Ohio.
Okay, fantastic. Next words. RPI, not a doctor. Material science. Patents, Starbucks University. The 518, need health insurance. Eisenhower Fellow, IP strategy. Sri Lanka, entrepreneur.
Badass. So there we go. Yes, thank you. So Nagesh Rao, I work for the federal government by day. I'm here in my personal capacity, and by nights and weekends I work for a major company out of Sri Lanka, and I just float around and work on projects that compel to my heart and mind. And by the way, Steve Sasson did win that argument. Just for the record, for those who are, I saw the video. He won the argument with Justice Scalia, so don't let him think he didn't fool you.
Okay, and I'm sure Chelsea's nervous now, but here we go. Here are your words, okay? And by the way, when you talk to them after this, feel free to bring up one of those words and find out. There's a story behind each one of those. Okay, Rick Perry, the lottery, under 40 in science and tech, advertising, DigiCity, Eisenhower Fellow, China, conference planner and a waitress, ultra marathon, Austin Tech Alliance, and entrepreneur.
My 12th word, it's fun to go through the journey of all that. I'm like, those words do describe me. 12th word is happy. I'm really happy right now.
Fantastic.
Grateful to be that
Okay,
way.
and did you introduce your name?
So I'm Chelsea Collier. I wear a couple of different hats, which I share with everyone on this panel. We all kind of do a lot of different things at one time. I'm the founder of DigiCity, which is a platform I created that came out of my Eisenhower Fellowship 2.5 years ago. I'm the editor-at-large for Smart Cities Connect. I work in the area of smart cities, bridging the gaps between public and private and academic sectors. And I'm also a co-founder of a local Impact Hub Austin, which is a local co-working space and a platform for the social good that's connected to a global platform of, I think, 104 Impact Hubs around the world.
Okay. Terrific. I'm going to start with some quick questions. So I would like to know, what is your main motivator in life? Kind of one thing, more than one word, but we'll just go down the
Gosh, of course. I should have sat here. Number one motivator in life, I want to spend every day doing what I love. I never want to feel like I'm working. So that's the people that I spend my day with, what I do at work or at my job, quote unquote. I just want to absolutely be passionate about how I spend my time.
Okay, great.
Yeah, my main motivator, how I approach every project is there a way for everyone to win? I don't want to be a part of things where someone wins big and someone loses. I want to make sure that it's an abundant way to work and live.
Okay.
Same, but I would say for me, it's moving the needle forward in the right direction.
Okay. So the reason I started off with motivators is because when we talk to, or I have talked to people who want to be entrepreneurs, really one of the first things they talk to me about is making millions and millions of dollars. And when I talked to all three of them, when I think even one of them, I even said, how important is money? And they said, well, you know, it's less than nothing. It doesn't even register. And so this, all three of the people on the stage are passionate about what they do, and then money will have to come later. Okay. So what I'd like to talk now is each one of you has some really interesting pivot points, not just one. But I'd like you to take one of your pivot points, and what I would say from what I would say normal, whatever that would be, but or traditional, how about that? Okay, from a traditional time, moving off into your first entree into something that was more entrepreneurial. And then I want you to talk about what were you doing, what did you go into, but what was your emotional state, you know, when you went into that? Because I'm sure there are people in the audience are thinking, is now the time to move? We heard that earlier today. Is it time to move, and when do you know that? Okay, so why don't we start with Chelsea?
Okay. So right out of school, I graduated from UT, this wonderful campus, in advertising. I chose advertising because I was scared of math, so I didn't go to business school, even though I got in. Looking back, I'm like, what the heck was I thinking? But anyway, so I started at an advertising agency where there was probably 30 people in the agency, and it was really cool. About a year after I got there, the agency split into two. And so then I had the opportunity to form my own agency with one of the founders and one other person. So that required a big shift and a big move. That was the first time at a very, very young age that I had the opportunity to own my own business. It was really exciting. But after a few years of doing that, and we were successful. You know, this was kind of like .com era, so everything was booming and it was really cool. But I just wasn't quite happy. And so on paper, it looked like everything's going great, this is time to celebrate, but something deep in my gut said this is not quite it. Like, yeah, you made it, but it's not quite where you want to be. But the logical part of my brain kept taking over. I'm like, what am I complaining about? I've got a great life, I've got a great business, I've got great partners. And so I decided I'm going to take the ultimate leap and figure out what I want to do next. So I went skydiving. And I asked myself a question as I was literally like holding on to the thing and my body's like flailing out, and I'm like however many tens of thousands of feet, or 1,000 feet, 3,000, 10, it doesn't matter, up in the air, and saying, if the parachute doesn't open and I just splat, did I do everything I wanted to do? Am I on the right path? And then I gave myself, from the time I let go of the boom, which is the thing that you hold on to the time when I landed on the ground, to answer that question. And it was either yes or it was no. And the answer when I got down to the ground was no. So then when I got down to the ground, I was like, okay, that's great. I'm selling my interest in the agency and I'm going to go figure out what's next, and that is my number one priority. So that's what I did.
Okay. And then when you think about how did you decide what you were going to do next?
Mm-hmm. I started not listening to my mind so much. I started listening to my heart, and I started listening to my gut a lot more. That led me back to Austin, Texas here, and I joined a nonprofit. We're helping mostly women, underserved women, figure out kind of what they needed to succeed in the workplace. So we did a lot of skills building. It was very, very different from the world that I had lived before, which is a bit more glamorous, but it was the right choice.
So you didn't go from luckily you landed, right?
I did. Everything's fine. It was a cool experience.
So you landed and you said you hadn't done everything you wanted, but you didn't also decide what you wanted to do next. Now you're in this, I'm going to try to figure it out phase.
Yeah.
Okay. Nagesh, and I'll come back to you. We'll circle back, but think about that, again, traditional to the most traditional to the least traditional pivot. And you have had so many, it's really ridiculous for me to figure out which one that is, so you can take a shot at it.
Sure. I mean, so to my friends here from the subcontinent, there's a hierarchy when it comes to careers to the Indian mom or the Indian dad or whatever it may be. And it's top of the food chain is medical doctor, right? And then, oh, didn't become a medical doctor. Okay, so what's next? So, PhD engineering? Okay, we can deal with that. And what's funny is after a PhD engineering, it comes down to law, MBA, right? So MBA beats out law. That's what's so funny about it. So when I was a kid growing up, my dad's a doctor. So, my parents are like, oh, doctor, medicine, you can take over the practice, right? Stuff like that. And I understand. They were immigrant entrepreneurs that came from India, from the backcountry. What was success to them was medicine. That's what they knew how to get out of poverty. My mom came from the rural village. My dad came from a pretty small shanty town. So I understand that to them was the mindset. To a kid like myself at the time, growing up and being raised in America, I'm being exposed to a ton of different other ideas and opportunities. And to my parents, it's funny. If you ask anyone who, they call us ABCDs, right? American Born Confused Desi. And you go to temple, you do your thing with the Indian community and stuff of that nature, and then you go to school. And so like in school you hear kids saying, I'm going to be an artist, or I'll be a police officer, or I'll go be an astronaut, stuff like that. And to our parents, it's kind of like, well, okay, that's nice, but first medicine, get the medical degree, and then you can go and have fun with anything else you want. So it comes to the point at which we're at college. I got into a pre-med program at Rensselaer, and I'm like, no, not doing it. I think I want to do a degree in philosophy. And at that point, my parents are like, oh, hells no. My dad's like, philosophy? He's like, so you're going to ask, would you like some salt on those fries? Is that? I'm like, what? And so he's like, look, if you're going to go do that, do something substantial with it. And I understand where they're coming from again. So I went and got a degree in materials engineering in addition to my degree in philosophy. So fast forward to what I'm going to do next in life. And my dad's still like, hey, medical school, you got your degree in engineering, but you can still go get your MD. And I'm like, no, I think I'm going to go to law school. He's like, oh, no. No, don't do that, because what? Or you're going to sue us doctors. That's what he thinks a lawyer does. They sue doctors. So I'm like, no, I can do patent law, intellectual property law. He's like, what? Okay. So switch up. I go do that, and that was a fun ride because I ended up becoming a patent examiner and working in that field. But and that's a wild ride too, working at the patent office and actually examining. I got to examine 3D printing patents and LED technology before anyone knew it was coming online. So like some of the first 3D printing patents coming, I was the examiner saying yes and no, mostly no, but sometimes yes. And then my dad, he's like, well, what are you doing with your life? Because I'm working in government. And so going back to the hierarchy for a second, right? Medical doctor, maybe being a professor of engineering or working for an engineering company, MBA, law degree, government, public servant. And my dad's looking at that and he's like, well, why? Once again, are you making money? Why not get married? Stuff of that nature. And I'm like, well, because I want to do good. I want to help serve my country. And he's like, okay, I get that, but go do that after you get your medical degree, and then you can go do Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, whatever it is you want to do. Just have that base. And so I think what drove me half the time was just proving a point that you can help make the world a better place. You can help move the needle and do it. It doesn't matter what your status is, doesn't matter what your stature is, doesn't matter what career path you're doing. I mean, going and helping out someone is better than not helping anyone out at all. And so it just kind of adapted over time as to like, I was asking myself, well, what the hell do I want to do? And anyone, you all know, risk versus rate of return, right? So there's the beta coefficient. You either minimize the risk for a given return, or you maximize the return for a given risk. And there's that beta value, the coefficient of 1. We all have a coefficient of 1, right? And then when you start to take on stuff, your risk factor changes tremendously, right? So dog, house, marriage, whatever it may be. So at this time, I'm floating around with a beta of 1, armed with my various, degrees, not knowing what I wanted to do. And it was at the point at which where I was like, oh, I'm a nomad. All right, I'll go be a nomad for a bit. And I got my MBA part-time, and I just started floating around. But what was really interesting is that I started developing all these different skill sets, this multidisciplinary viewpoint. And it made me deadly in a way, especially lethal in the sense of I knew how the system worked. I knew how the games were played. I was watching how people play their games, whether it came through technology advances or patents or business plays, whatever it may be. And so that's what all of a sudden got me going through the pipeline all of a sudden. Is I knew how different people were talking, communicating, and kind of connecting the dots. And what I decided to do instead of doing that and allowing that to kind of, take advantage of it, I started connecting the dots with people who I knew and cared about because I saw a chance to move the needle forward.
Okay, great. So, and we'll pick up on some of these. Now, Courtney, I think I know what story it's going to be, but, and you had a dream job, I know. Is that the one you're going to go with? Okay,
absolutely.
Go from your dream job to what happened next.
Yeah, and that, maybe the audience can relate to this a lot too. So obviously, the reason I went into engineering in the first place is when I was 3 years old, I went to see my very first space shuttle launch, back when the space shuttle was a thing. And 3-year-old me decided that one day I either wanted to A, be an astronaut, or B, go work for NASA. So that's really what got me into electrical engineering to begin with. And when I graduated, I had a job at NASA. I was a power systems engineer. I actually spent a little bit of time down at Johnson Space Center and then worked up in Cleveland at Glenn Research Center, the center that nobody knows about. But about 2 years into that journey, I realized something, and that was that the name of the company that you work for isn't enough to make you happy. And the idea of working on really cool space technology isn't really enough to make you happy. I realized very quickly into my job that I did not enjoy engineering whatsoever. And I had a bit of a panic moment because I thought, my gosh, it took me 6 years to get through college, and I thought that I had my dream job, and now here I am at my dream job, and I'm completely miserable. What I realized is that as much as I could do engineering, I was a people person. And I discovered that because when I was in college, I also started a company, and it was something that I had been doing kind of nights and weekends. It was my number one hobby. So I was working with my startup while I was working this full-time job at NASA. And with the startup company, we were a tech startup, but I gravitated naturally towards the operations and business development role. I was like, I really like being the person that's talking about the technology. I'm a great engineering translator, right? So taking the technical information because I understood it, translating it to something that business people could actually understand. And I love doing that. So the biggest pivot for me was I walked in the door at NASA one day and I said, I can't do this anymore. I quit. And I had no job lined up per se immediately. I had some leads. We'll probably get into some details of risk mitigation because I didn't do that. I didn't make that decision blindly. But I did quit my job at NASA to go work with my startup company, work in a field where I was doing what I actually loved. So that was my big one.
And did you know that you were going from something you didn't like to something you loved, or were you just trying something out?
I had a hunch of types of roles that I would fit into because I had that experience with my startup. And whenever I talk to students, I tell them, that's why internships and co-ops are so important because you don't really know what you love or what you don't love or what you hate until you actually go out and try it. Like, it's one thing to hear about something. Like, if somebody describes to you, what chocolate ice cream tastes like. You're like, okay, well that sounds good, but you don't really know until you try it. Like, you don't know what it tastes like. So that's what I knew, is that I had this taste of a different role with my startup. When I was leaving NASA, I was going to something in that direction.
Right.
Vague idea. Yeah.
It certainly is a similar path. When I led the Edison program, there were about 1,000 people, and they're all in their 20s. And what I try to tell them is, 95% of you do not know what you want to do, and that's more normal than knowing what you want to do. So just in case you're out there thinking, I don't know what I want to do, we just have examples of all 3 people that actually took a giant leap and still didn't quite know what they want to do, but just trying to edge ever closer. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about money for just a second, because you quit, you floated, and
there was a lot of quitting too.
quit, float. So, but you need money to live. That's what everyone probably really wants to know. How the heck do you quit? Are you independently wealthy? So, without getting too personal, I'm really curious myself. So, where'd you get the money to do this, or how did you live, or where did you live?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just go down the road.
Go down the line. Yeah, sure. So this goes all into the risk mitigation. When I talk to an aspiring entrepreneur, I say, people always pin entrepreneurs like these ridiculous, crazy risk takers that we just like drop everything and go move back in with our parents. Actually, I've come to believe entrepreneurs are probably the world's best risk mitigators. So usually when we're going out there, we're taking calculated risks. And when I decided to leave my job at NASA, thing number one, I've been working for a couple of years. So I did save up some money. I knew I had a rainy day fund. I could survive for X amount of months. I had some backup plans. I had a place where I could live rent-free for a while. So there are all these different ways. I say, when you're thinking about making this giant leap, think about the assets that you have. And assets not just in terms of financial and money, but also friends and family that can support you, a network of people that can get you another job really quickly if you need it. And that's what will help to break that fall. That's like your parachute, right? When you're jumping out of the plane, you're going to go do something crazy. Think about those assets, and do you have enough to go out and take a big risk? Now, that being said, there's been multiple times in my career when I've gone months. I think the longest was probably 4 or 5 months without a source of income. And those, you might say, well, why would anybody ever do that? They were some rough times for me, and I thought, gosh, I have this electrical engineering degree, I should be making boatloads of money, but I'm not. But I always come back to think, how much would you be willing to pay to have your dream job? How much would you be willing to pay year to year or take off of your salary? What's it worth it to you to absolutely love what you're doing 8 hours a day? And for me, the money that I was losing, however many grand off my annual salary, was worth it. Like, it's an investment. It's my time. It's how I spend every single day of my life. And to me, the money that I was losing was totally worth it. So that's just the way I think about being poor.
Yep, okay. Okay.
It's really smart. Yeah.
So, some more money stories, please.
Yeah, no, and I just appreciate you asking the question about money.
Yeah.
I think we don't serve each other if we don't talk about the things that we really want to know that are taboo. I don't think money is taboo. I think money is awesome, and I like to make a lot of it.
Yep.
But it's not the thing that motivates me. So, so when I did the leap from the advertising agency to the nonprofit, I didn't have a rainy day fund, but I knew that I had about a month-ish of kind of runway, and I didn't have kids in a fancy lifestyle, and I could kind of figure out a way to make it work. But I had something more important, which was a credit card. I'm not saying that you should leverage your life on a credit card, let me be real clear. But I also knew that I knew how to hustle. And I could figure out something to do some way or another, and I was going to be okay. And I learned that from my mom, single mom, raised 2 kids. And, we never had a ton of money, but we always had enough. And I also understood that I didn't need a fancy lifestyle. I didn't need to fake it. What I needed to do was really tap into what my purpose was and why I'm here and how I could be of service and at the same time build and honor who I was trying to become in the world. So, yeah.
Can you give us a time when you actually had to hustle for money? I mean, you were
Yeah.
a waitress, you did, you
Oh,
did
that's
some
in grad school. Yeah,
Okay,
Whew,
yeah.
that was a hustle time. Yeah,
Right.
so,
and conference planning and, I mean,
Yeah.
but what about, okay, so think about that. You had a month.
yep.
Were you making money in a month?
No, I was interviewing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was just kind of looking at what I wanted to do, and literally, I think it was the internet age, but it certainly wasn't where it was now. So it was still just kind of showing up and submitting paper applications.
Were you
and-
scared? Did that make you want to grab the first thing you could? Or you said, you know what,
There is a bit of that. I had a job offer from a very small family office. Again, kind of similar to the advertising agency. I can't even remember what it was. But I just felt like this isn't quite it. And I had really committed to waiting for what felt like the right fit. And so I could have taken something. I certainly felt the fear, I didn't know what was going to happen next. But that's okay. That's the whole reason.
but I also,
jumped.
I think I see that too. If there's a layoff in the company or you quit and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to just do something I love, eventually fear may set in.
Yeah.
And you could actually go from something bad to something worse
Right.
as well.
When
Yeah.
So I also, at the end of the lottery stint, so I went from the nonprofit to a government job working for the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, in his economic development world. That was really interesting. And so after 3.5 years of that, I was like, oh God, I got the dream job again, but it's not quite right. So I went to the Texas Lottery to build their education platform. All of the money that comes from lottery tickets goes back to education. And then after, 6 months, I was like, dang, this isn't right again. And so I left that good state job, good benefits, reasonable salary, all this is cool. I'm like, I really have to figure this out. Yet again, here we go. And I went to grad school, which is 2 years of not having an income, having to pay for tuition, and in the middle of all of that, started working with a group that wanted to do an entrepreneurs conference, and I needed to pay tuition, so I did it while working a waitressing job and going to school. So that was definitely a hustle time, but it was worth it because it's definitely the catalyst that's led me to where I am today.
Okay, fantastic. And money?
Well, I mean, I live cheap, so it's a little different now that I'm married and I have a house. But back in my 20s and stuff, I kept it cheap. I kept it frugal. I had very little debt. I usually worked while going to school, so I was either a part-time worker, a full-time worker, part-time student, full-time student. I tease my parents and stuff, but they actually, at the end of the day, were a good moral supporter for me, especially after my startup failed in LA. My parents championed and cheerleaded and said, you can do this, you can get back up and fight and fight above your weight class. And so with my parents and also my sisters and just a lot of good friends having my back and having couches to crash on and, barter, the bartering economy. So I would, help my friends out or help my sisters out. So for a period of time, I crashed on the floor of my sister's house for a bit, and I just helped her out with her kids and as her husband went to work or stuff like that. Biggest thing I can say, I had a 10-box rule. So if everything had to fit in 10 boxes in a car, and if it couldn't fit, if it went beyond above that, I let it go. So you just learn to let it go. So if it goes above the 10 boxes, it's like, all right, I gotta let it go. So that's kind of how I did as I floated around.
So what I'm hearing is, okay, so now we have all three of these people who have had, I had 17 jobs in one company. I think they had 17 jobs among, or individually among a lot of companies, right? But you talk about things not being just right, and you're oscillating between, is this good? And you're kind of trying to narrow in on the kind of the perfect job. So we can talk about whether something is perfect or not. But I would like to know numerically where you are right now, how happy you are on a scale from 1 to 10, and if it's not a 10, what are you looking for? So what because you guys are kind of unsettled, maybe a little bit by nature, but you're trying to find something. Yeah. And by the way, I would say I'm way older than them, and what I wanted at your age is probably different than what I want now. But so on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy are you? I know that's a little, that's also intrusive, but and then what could bring you, at least a number higher we'll go down the...
Sure. So right now I put myself at an 8, pretty close to a 10, but I want to take the work that I've been doing with innovation hubs and incubators and start doing that on a national level. So that's kind of the next step in my career, and I'm actively pursuing that right now. So I'm having great impact, doing amazing work, love what I'm doing in Northeast Ohio, but I want to start having a broader impact. So that's why I say right now I'm at an 8, shooting for that 10.
Fantastic.
Are we going this way?
Yep.
Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like at a 15.
Okay.
I
knew you, I knew.
So freaking happy.
I knew it'd at least be a 10, but, yep.
But I'm not done.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, happy doesn't mean hands off the wheel, feet on the table, like, let's just coast. I really want to do the work that I'm doing now on the global stage, but I also want to do it on a very local, small town stage. So I work in the area of smart cities, again, just helping communities evolve in the digital age. And I'm really interested in working in the small towns who can't afford big consultants, they can't afford to go to conferences, they don't have access to the knowledge and the insight that they need to not be part of a coming digital rust belt. So I really want to help them build that.
That's great. So you're on a 15 on your way to a 20.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Who knows?
Okay. Okay.
I'm in the bonus round. That's how I see it. Everything I wanted to hit, I hit for the most part. There are more milestones that add up, and I'm like, well, those are bonus. If I get it, great. If I don't, I don't. I'm happy. My wife's awesome. I got a good family and friends. As long as I'm with the crew that I like most and are around me, and they can put up with me and I put up with them, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, great. So we also typically think of entrepreneurs as fearless, and people that skydive, for example. You say, "Oh, that's so brave." That's what I would say, and you would say, "No, I was compelled to do that." So I always think that people that I think are courageous don't think they are. So you don't really know it. Speaking of fear, however, you've got to be afraid of something. So let's bring this down to maybe you share fears with people in the audience. So, and I'll go the other way, right? Yeah. So start thinking and don't copy the women. But what do you fear the most? Or if that's too personal, second most.
Yeah. Nancy, you're awesome.
You know, there are times. Well, two things. One, spiders scare the heck out of me. Especially the ones with the beady eyes. Like, what the hell? I mean, they're good. They eat the insects, bugs. So all more power. Just stay there. I think probably the biggest thing is just disappointing. Like, I don't like to disappoint folks. I don't like to disappoint people. I like to try to give it my all. So I guess that's the biggest fear is, like, am I doing enough? If I'm not, what can I do to do more to help make the world a better place?
Right. Okay.
My fear is never being good enough, not smart enough, not working hard enough, not thoughtful enough. It's that gap. So a lot of my interpersonal work is just being where I am, when I am, how I am, who I am. And trying to keep the lens clean, trying to tell the truth and be really honest all the time, even when it's embarrassing. Because it's embarrassing to say, I'm afraid of not being good enough up here on a stage where people are probably expecting you to give some huge wisdom. So.
Although I think I've talked to people outside the conference, and I think people do feel that way. So on that note, what I'm always curious is, do you think that fear propels you to greatness, or is that something that you want to curb? Because you think it's maybe not that useful anymore.
Yeah, it's an invitation to explore where that fear is coming from. So if my fear is, I'm in a room full of engineers who think in ways that I may not naturally think, I wonder if I'm smart enough to be in this room. Well, that's ridiculous because we all have different things to give and share. So then dialing down into what is the basis of that, and then coming to the truth of, nope, there's somebody in this room who needs to hear what I have to share, and vice versa. I've already learned so much just from this panel, and I'm excited to meet the rest of you. So what is there to be afraid of? It's ridiculous. Just get out there and give.
That's a tough one for me because I'd say I don't really fear anything aside from heights, which I definitely have a fear of heights. I love roller coasters, but I fear heights. But no, I mean, I think that the one thing that, you know, I worry about is not having an impact with my work because, you know, at one point, you know, I've been talking all about on this panel about, you know, loving what you do, and that's great, but that could also be a very selfish thing. So if you're always looking to optimize your personal situation, you know, the flip side of that is that part of job satisfaction to me is that I'm also actually changing something. You know, I don't want to come into an organization and have it be the same or, you know, God forbid, be worse off than when I came in. So I think my greatest fear is that, you know, I'd spend time and effort and my life's work on something and then not see an impact or not see that help people. So if there was a fear, I think that would be it.
Right. I guess also people might want to know, what does it take to be an entrepreneur in your opinion? Start in the middle and then go on.
Yeah. What does it take to be an entrepreneur? Curiosity, dissatisfaction with the status quo, an ability to surround yourself with people who are different than you are and sometimes intimidate you, and truly to be able to, or to want to answer a question that has not yet been answered, which is kind of the same thing as curiosity, but that, I think that's where the impact piece of it is.
Right.
You know, or is there a problem to be solved that does not yet have a solution, and can you participate in building it?
Okay. Courtney?
Yeah, for me, I think having seen and worked with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, the number one thing that I could tell you to do is just be action-oriented. I see so many people that talk about ideas that they have, and they're talking about their ideas, they're patenting things, they're, you know, going out to pitch competitions, and they're just not going out there and doing it, building the prototype, you know, starting the company, selling product. The most successful entrepreneurs I've known have just been really crazy action-oriented, and whether it's passion that's driving them or a need, something out of necessity where they have to start a company. If you want to become an entrepreneur, it sounds weird, but you just have to go out and become an entrepreneur. We could go down a whole other rabbit hole about, you know, entrepreneurship training and classes and things like that, but I think that the best way to get good at anything is to just go out and do it. Or even, you know, that doesn't mean you have to do it full time, but going out and starting a company on the side, starting a side business, the best way to learn about it is to go out and get that experience. So I tell people about entrepreneurship. Do you remember that viral video, that Shia LaBeouf thing? I don't even know if I'm saying his name right because I don't pop culture. That Just Do It video, just look it up on YouTube. That's it.
Yeah. And it could mean you're doing wireless devices in your basement, as we saw. Some advice?
Well, everything they've said has been spot on. I would say a couple of things. One, an ability to cope with failure, because you will face a lot of hurdles and failures there. So don't be afraid of that. The other big thing, and it builds off what Steve said earlier, there's a difference between criticism and critical feedback. And so when you surround yourself with the right people, make sure you discern when it's criticism and it's critical feedback, because I think, Steve, you said it spot on. There are a lot of people who are jealous when you're actually being successful in what it is you're doing, or you're trying to move that needle forward. So, you know, it's like Jay-Z said, you know, dirt off the shoulder, brush it off. As there's haters, and then there's those who want to help make you become a maker. So hang with the makers. Yeah,
you really do need to know who is supporting you. Yep. And who isn't, and sometimes they look exactly the same. Yeah. And you take something that's not well-meaning, and it hurts you rather than helps you. Yep. I'm going to get ready to start opening up for questions, so I'm going to ask a kind of a fun question while you guys are thinking of some questions to ask our panel. I guess when I think about entrepreneurs, particularly in smaller businesses, I'm trying to figure out what your day would be like. Is it ultimately ridiculously flexible, or is it just I'm working 12 hours a day, or I wake up in the middle of the night? Just kind of give us an idea, because I know what it's like to work for GE. We have a lot of people working for corporations. You know what that's like. You probably have to be there at a certain time and have to do a time card. What's life like? So Courtney, we're going to start with you.
I have a feeling we'll be similar, but maybe kind of different, because some of it's just personal, right? I know entrepreneurs that are up at 3 a.m. That is not me. I am up at 5 a.m. starting my workday. And I also, for the past 5 years, have been a remote worker. So
And you live in Ohio?
Yes, Cleveland, Ohio. So I've worked from home, extremely efficient. I get a lot done in those hours when nobody else is even awake yet. From like 5 to 7 a.m. I call my workday kind of work-life integration. So I have no fixed work hours whatsoever. I'll work whenever I'm needed to work. So if it's 10 p.m., fine. If it's 5:30 a.m., that's perfectly great. But just FYI, I'm going to the gym at 7 a.m. and nobody's going to bother me. I might be on my phone checking emails, but yeah. So my day is completely flexible, very fluid. And again, that's a combination of just the remote work environment and just kind of how I set up my day and how I know I'm most productive in the morning, not at night. So.
Yeah. Okay, Chelsea?
Yeah, kind of the same. I've put some things in place to help me adjust because I'm a natural introvert that's working in a very extroverted world. So I've had to learn how to take care of my energy levels. I have a new rule I've instituted called No Meeting Monday. So I will not take a meeting unless it is absolutely critical and necessary. And then I try to do that on,
But I notice you'll take them on a Saturday.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Saturday's
totally
fine.
Cool.
So.
That is great. Yeah, and I travel a lot, so I really love that my schedule is unpredictable, and that ultimately I make the decision of how I'm going to structure that and schedule that. So yeah, one day I may be on a plane, or I'm giving a talk, or I'm hosting an event, or I'm writing and researching and building and whatever. It's all very fluid and different from day to day, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay, great.
It was a lot more flexible until a few months ago when I opted for the desk jockey promotion at the office. So now I have a team of like 100 plus folks as I oversee digital assets and digital products for our federal agency, working for the CIO. So we've become more rigid 9 to 5 on that front. So my flexibility has been kind of chipped away for a little bit, but that's okay because it's got to learn. And for me, it's a good learning. I mean, everyone was kind of like, "Whoa, why are you doing this?" And I said, "It's a learning experience. I want to learn infrastructure operations. I got to learn to adapt and change. And sometimes when in Rome, you do as the Romans do for a little bit."
That's right. I know the rest of that quote. Okay, I had lunch with you. Okay, do we have some questions here?
Thanks for this refreshing candor and depth from your perspectives, and each and every one of you including Nancy, have shared with us tremendous perspectives and the blood, sweat, grit, and all the life experiences. But it turns out that the core attributes in each and every one of your stories seems to be what we dismiss or maybe sideline as soft skills. And it turns out the words compassion, happiness, love, and friendship hardly appear in any curriculum these days, let alone engineering ones. Right. Are we missing something fundamental here? In other cases, how have you been able to implement little changes within your own cosmologies or the environments that you operate in?
Mm-hmm. Why don't we take the person that most wants to answer that question?
I can say, so it's funny you mentioned that because I took, in my current new role, I took it on at a time of tumultuousness. And so it was those little things happen where when change happens, new leadership comes in, it can get rough right off the bat. And so what I did was I trusted the folks and said, look, you're in your role for a reason, so I'm going to trust you. But I'm going to trust and verify a little bit just to make sure we do this right. Doesn't hurt also that I'll buy pizza, and soda, and if I could, beer too, but I can't. But stuff like that, I do these little things where I'll go up to them and say, hey, you worked your ass off, so go take an hour off, or take the day off, just don't say anything. So stuff like that, just to remind them that, hey, we're in this together.
Right, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things. Let me just see if there's another question, otherwise I'll have people ask.
So, thanks to all three of you.
Very hard to see.
Hello.
I see guru, and that's about it.
Yeah. Got it.
All right. So thanks to all three of you for your time and sharing your experiences with us. So this question goes to all three of you, since one thing in common in all three of you is that you guys are risk takers. And at some point in your life, you took some risk and made some changes. You're not happy with what you're doing. And then you decided to go south, like you decided to go in a different direction. So the question is, how long were you willing to be that risk taker, or how many times were you going to be willing to fail before you quit and then went on a normal route that everyone else was taking?
That's a great question.
I mean, I guess for me, I would continue to take risks as long as it would take for me to reach my goal. So long as, again, it was kind of within my personal bounds of a risk that I could tolerate, it's always worth it, right? If I'm in a position where I'm unhappy or there's something else, there's something that's next on my path that I could see, I'm just not sure how to get there, I'll keep trying. I mean, believe me, I've chased down opportunities, hit a lot of dead ends. It's like a giant maze in my career, and none of which I could have predicted or even thought would happen when I graduated, by the way. But no, it's nonstop, and I'm certain that I'll continue to take risks throughout my career.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think I've learned how to become comfortable in a constant state of discomfort. And every time I kind of follow the rules and they get in that comfy state where I'm like, okay, everything's cool, it takes literally about 2 days before I'm like, all right, what's next? And now I just understand that's part of my recipe, that's part of my fabric, so that's just the way it is.
I think it's changed over time for me, but I think the biggest thing is it's like a multi-variable equation. Know as many of the variables possible before taking the risk.
Okay, I think we have a question here.
I'm Ziad Bouida. I'm from Carleton University. I'm a young professional chair, Ottawa section, Canada. We see many small businesses being acquired by giants. So basically they grow, you do these efforts, sleepless nights, and end up changing names, being acquired by a giant. So how do small businesses need to deal with that? Is it like to grow more, to collaborate with others to create the big name, or to end up being acquired like that and then changing names? How to deal with that? Yeah.
So I struggle. In my prior life, so full disclosure, I used to run and help out with the SBIR program across the 11 participating federal agencies. So some of the giants that came out of that program included Qualcomm, Illumina, 23andMe, Biogen. So that's been a constant query of like, how do you, in the federal government, how do you, in this, even state, local, how do you cultivate that incentivization of keeping small businesses to scale up and grow? They are the backbone of the global economy. And it comes down to is paying it forward, I think. So some small businesses want to go and get acquired, some don't. Some startups go for that path. It's a multifaceted play, and it's a complex question you're asking because the policy ramifications that make that system work are very fine-tuned in a certain way. The big thing I will say, though, is that, case in point, look what Elon Musk and Peter Thiel did with PayPal, right? They went, they sold it, got acquired, all that stuff. They took their money, and instead of taking the money and keeping it for themselves, they went back out and said, we're going to do this again. And that's why you've got the PayPal mafia now, right? Mm-hmm. So with LinkedIn and Twitter and Tesla and all those other different things, they went and took their money, instead of keeping it for themselves, they said, we're going to go back out and we're going to go and seed a new generation. That's one answer. There's probably a ton of answers out there, but just that's one thing to think about, is if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I think most entrepreneurs don't do one and done. It's just not in their nature.
And I think it depends on what your motivation as a founder is. So if your motivation as a founder is, I want to have a company with hundreds, thousands, millions of employees, then you build a company for that end. Yeah. If your motivation is, I just want to start stuff and then have it be resourced by another company, or I want my face on the cover of Forbes, or whatever that motivation is, that can help you determine the path.
I think we have a question back there.
Hi, my name is Adriana from Atlanta, YP. So my question is, I've heard a lot of career shifts, and life is a roller coaster. So have you ever had a low point in your life where maybe a layoff or maybe just without a job? What would you tell yourself to get back on it, to get back on track? What was your fuel? And knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
It's a great question.
Yeah, that is. So I'll take a stab at this. So there was this point in between with one of the jobs where I spent about 4 or 5 months looking for what was next, kind of, having an idea of what I wanted to do, but there was nothing right in front of me. So what I did, and that would, I'd call that a pretty tough point where I wasn't easily just jumping into the next role. I was actively searching, and that was terrifying. But I leaned a lot on my personal network, and this is actually something I really wanted to bring up because, especially being in consulting, being in entrepreneurship, your network and the people that you know in your industry are just absolutely everything to your career. They've been every single job that I've gotten, every single consulting project, all of the progress, it's all been about other people. It's not just like me going out there throwing my resume up on Indeed.com. It's personal relationships. And so when I tell people focus on your network, it's not like walking around at a networking event, like shoving your business card in people's faces. It's like developing a lasting relationship. So there's somebody that you could go to when you're struggling, you're looking for a job. They could say, hey, well, I know these other people in my network. Let me see if I could help you out, because they know you on a personal level and they trust you. So that's everything. And that's the one piece of advice I'd give anybody that's struggling is, really think about your personal network. Think about how they could help you, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Okay, and I think we have one more question, but I love that question because everybody, and I mean everybody, no matter how successful they look, has some mighty low points in their life, and you just have to say for now and move on. One more question.
Hi,
and then
thank you for taking my question. Really excellent discussion. I wanted to know what's maybe one book that you read that assisted you on your journey, your entrepreneurial journey. Just at least one book that helped you.
My important book has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It's called Everything Belongs by Richard Rohr. And he's a Franciscan priest, very rooted in the Catholic tradition. I'm not Catholic, that part isn't important to me. Oh my God, is that you? That was real, okay.
I am going to say timing is everything, and then next year we'll be talking about her religious conversion.
I feel like I need to genuflect or something. No, so Everything Belongs by Richard Rohr, and you can substitute God for whatever word you want, universe or spirit, whatever. But yeah, that's a really good one.
Okay, it's really hard for me to pick between these two. I really enjoyed 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and also Start With Why by Simon Sinek. 2 great books.
Like Chelsea, it's not a book on entrepreneurship. It's the book called The Power of One. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's a fascinating story, and I really related to Bodhi, so that would probably be it.
Okay. So they will be around for more questions. I do want to end, and I guess I want to ask 2 questions at the same time real quick, but we haven't actually talked about having a family and being an entrepreneur, and I'm guessing that many of you are really curious whether you can do that or not. I don't know the personal status, or I think I do know the personal status of everyone on stage, but I guess if you were to project, is this something you can do with, let's say, children, which a lot of people do want? And or could you also answer a question like what didn't, is there something you desperately want to tell the audience?
I'd say yes. Actually, my wife and I fantasize about retiring in our 50s so that we could tag team and do a joint coffee chai shop to get food cart kind of thing, like food truck thing. You love it, Guru. But we fantasize about that all the time, and we said, that's actually, we met with the financial advisor a year ago, and we said, this is a milestone we want. So I think you can do it.
Okay.
I think anybody can do whatever it is that they want. I never wanted to be in that mother role, so that's not a direction that I chose. But it's I don't think it's because I couldn't have my career and a family. I think if I would have wanted that, I would have done it.
Does being an entrepreneur automatically mean it's a 100-hour week?
It's whatever you want it to be week. I saw a visual the other day. You know, the standard saying is, have the job you love and never work another day in your life. And they had crossed out another day in your life. He said, if you have the job you love, you basically work all the time.
Right.
But that work is joyful and it's creative and
right,
it's fun.
right.
And why wouldn't you want to do that? So yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Agree. Not married, no kids. So maybe this isn't a great representation, but no,
Facing
I've
diversity.
known entrepreneurs that had, recently had babies, and it's all just about finding the right partner, obviously, that's supportive of that. Just to speak on a very personal level, I've been in relationships where that's not been the case, and now I'm in one where that is, and that's great, but you really have to find somebody that's going to support you when, you're up, at 2 a.m. working on your startup, and they support you and they understand. So it's all about finding the right person, but I absolutely think it's possible. And, just given like my personal situation now, especially nowadays, it's so much easier to work remotely. You have distributed teams. That could be great for a family. So I definitely think it is possible.
Well, I want to thank the panel because I told them, I didn't give them any questions in advance or anything in advance, and I just said, I'm going to ask you really personal questions. Can you just be honest? And they all agreed, and I think they were, and I think they answered some questions that you probably have always wanted to ask. So thank you very much, and especially for being so honest.
Thanks for having us.